All right, here we go. Your field of expertise and background is in soundtracks, sound effects, and television. How did you combine all of those to bring together Dice Legends? And how did you start your journey with TTRPGs?
Well, so in terms of the first question, I am a musician. I compose music for the TV world, and I've got a lot of classical training. I played violin from a young age, but when you compose music in the TV world, you don't get to use all that kind of orchestral knowledge and training.
Right.
So when I started this Dice Legends channel, I was really excited to use it and to create all the orchestral music. So that was a lot of fun. And creating all the theme music, all the background music, I really enjoyed that. Sometimes I do streams of writing music for the channel, which is a lot of fun. So that's the first thing, and that's how I got into that. And the second is, when did I get into TTRPGs? When I was 7 years old. So I've been doing this longer than probably most people in this chat. So yeah, I've been playing for a long time.
Well, 7 is like an age that's kind of unheard of. D&D is usually in a quote unquote teenage adult type of game, not like a 7-year-old. How does a 7-year-old cope with being a player or a DM, if you were DM at 7, player at 7? Like, how do they cope with that?
Yeah, so how it happened is that we grew up in a university town in Indiana. And so a friend of mine his mom, I think, must have gotten involved and found out about it somehow. And this friend of mine, he was a big 8-year-old, and he started showing us how to play this game. And it was completely no relation to the actual rules at all. And yeah, so he introduced me, and it was cool. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, well, that's amazing. Like, I can't imagine. Like, I have nieces and nephews, and they are under the teenage age as for now, and they're vaguely interested, but as a 7-year-old, I don't think they would ever be. That's very impressive. Um, did you start this whole thing as full time, or did it slowly build up to it? How did this whole thing become most of your time?
Really, right from the beginning, when we decided to do this channel, we decided we wanted to do it pretty seriously, and we actually set it up as a company. And to get, because to get sets and things like that requires a space, and you have to put some investment of time and money and cameras, all that kind of stuff. So we set ourselves up as a company. I was anticipating that it would probably be about 50% of my working week's time when setting it up, but it's actually probably closer to 75 to 80% of my working week's time. But yeah, I started off in TTRPGs as a player for just a little while, but then as a teenager, it really became a dominant passion, I guess, and took up all of my evenings and weekends. I don't know about you.
So why Dungeons and Dragons? Why not, like, I don't know, Cyberpunk or Vampire the Masquerade? Why Dungeons and Dragons specifically?
I've played a whole bunch of TTRPGs, right? Of course, I've played a whole bunch, and I own a whole bunch, and I love them all. Some I love more than others, but for our show, Dungeons and Dragons is by far the biggest channel, the biggest, yeah, not channel, but what's it called when you have, anyway, if you're streaming any other game, the audience availability is so much smaller. So it's that. Plus, also, I do love Dungeons and Dragons, and I love fantasy. So that's why we stream Dungeons and Dragons.
In the United States, the average D&D table, up until recently, hasn't been very diverse. I don't know how it is in New Zealand, but how does the diversity that is represented at your table inspire your creativity? Like, what does that do for you?
Yeah, well, diversity was around this table was essential for our show. And so right from the very beginning, we knew that we needed to have the kind of expressions and the voice of a diverse cast of people. Because diversity brings strength with it. And here in New Zealand, the Maori name for New Zealand is Aotearoa. So here in Aotearoa, we have we have a really strong indigenous population, voice of indigenous population, the Maori people. We have a lot of people from the Pacific. And so we wanted our cast had to reflect the reality of our nation. And Raylene, one of our players from the Philippines, and we've got a large South Asian population in New Zealand. So it's really important right from the beginning that our show represented the nation that we're from and the voices that we're from.
Which makes sense. Yeah, it helps to create a cohesiveness, not just with your audience, but just the players themselves. Most of your players, I think all of your players are actors, correct?
Yeah. So all of our actors come from either the theater or television world. When I first approached them and did auditions with the cast members, at that stage, 3 of them were in the theater world and 1 was in the television as a TV presenter.
Oh, wow.
But now that is completely switched. And now 3 of them are TV in the work for television and 1 works in theater.
Really?
But yeah, they're all professional actors and are awesome.
The ongoing campaign on Dicelegenz, you interact regularly with people all over the world. Do you find that what you do is sometimes lost in translation, or does it appear that it brings everyone across the world together?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, to be honest, because our cast members definitely use terms and language that here in New Zealand people understand that are everyday words. For example, in New Zealand, the Maori kind of informal way of saying hello to someone is to say kia ora. And of course, so we will often say, oh, kia ora, everyone. And of course, our audience that aren't from New Zealand have no idea what we're saying. And there's a whole bunch of words and phrases that I definitely people outside of New Zealand wouldn't know. And like one of our cast members, Ronnie, we were talking about diversity. Ronnie is from Samoa. And so he uses Samoan terms when he casts magic. He uses the Samoan language to describe and it's awesome. But I know, of course, that people outside of New Zealand wouldn't be familiar with that.
Right.
But that, I don't think is a problem, because our international audience is more and more used to working across borders, across embracing cultures, so actually our audience on our channel is very diverse. 60% are from the United States of America, which is understandable because it's such a big population. But we've got heaps in Europe, we've got Australia, we've through South America, Central America, so I think actually the globalness of it is brilliant.
How did you recruit all those 4 actors? Like you said that you held auditions, but how many people came to audition? Was it just a few? Was it just like lying around the block? How many people came to audition?
Well, our audition process was actually pretty linear. What happened is I did a bit of research among people that I know in the television industry that knew people that might be good. And also I had some people in mind. So Ronnie, who I mentioned just before, I'd worked with Ronnie on a TV show for 7 years and I knew that he would be awesome. So I actually called him and said, Ronnie, we're doing this Dungeons and Dragons show. Do you want to be in it? And he said, yes, of course I do. He had no idea what on earth I was talking about. He thought I was talking about Magic the Gathering or something. He had no idea at all what the heck was going on.
Right.
And then the others, basically, each person that we interviewed, we loved so much that we offered them the job right on the spot. So we actually did 4 interviews and hired 4 people. But we did have a much bigger list of people before we approached them for interviews.
Okay.
That we had probably maybe about 15 or so people that we were considering, but we only actually approached 4 to do the interviews.
Okay. So, what is a common myth in TTRPGs, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, that you had to deal with when you first started with this current cast on Dicelegenz? Or just when you've been DMing at all?
I think the biggest myth is that this is only for nerds, you know, that, and this kind of, although it's the mainstreaming of Dungeons and Dragons has been really fast in the last 10 years, there's still an undercurrent of, even among our cast members, like sometimes they'll just say, like one of our cast members, Monique, is the opposite of the typical nerd. Like she parties with rugby players. She is, you know, she's genuinely a cool kid.
Right.
And so, you know, even among our cast, they're surprised sometimes at how much they love doing this nerdy stuff.
Right.
And so I think that myth that Dungeons and Dragons is only for nerds definitely is something that we constantly battle with, even now.
Really? It's strange because with shows like I forget the name of the TV show now, it's on Netflix with the kids that they did a D&D type of special. It kind of gave rise to a lot of people playing D&D. What is the name of that show? And it seemed like people during COVID kind of gravitated toward things where they could still be with people without being with people. How did the original Dicelegenz story evolve? Like, especially like when you first started. Thank you, Stranger Things. That's right.
Yeah. So what we did is, I had a couple of very broad, vague things in mind. I wanted it to be in a big, grand city.
Okay.
That was kind of an analogy of Constantinople, or what's called Istanbul now. I knew I wanted to do that because that helped with some subplot elements. Because if you're all in a city, then your subplot elements stay with you, whereas if you go on a journey across lands, all those subplot elements, all those relationships get left behind. So I knew I wanted it to be in a big city. But in terms of the story, I didn't have anything in mind until we got our cast members together for our first cast meeting, and we did brainstorming about what kind of characters and what kind of themes we wanted to explore. And so we threw around a whole bunch of ideas, and the one that stuck on the wall, the one that people really loved, was the idea of ordinary, humble town guards. That they weren't extraordinary people, that they were just ordinary town guards just doing their job in this crazy world that they were ill-equipped to try to help.
Right.
So that was the idea, and the kind of core concept behind that is, in today's world, all of us actually have power to do things to change the world in which we live. And so that was the core concept that we wanted to express through this idea that everyone can make a difference in the world that they live in. So that's how it started.
Okay, wow. Okay, that's very, very cool. Like, I like the enclosed idea of keeping the players within the walls of the city and they're not being able to travel all over. Why specifically did you decide to keep that type of play, rephrase it, keep that type of enclosed map instead of having a bigger open world type of play?
So the reason for that is that a show like ours is different from a game when you're playing with your friends, or you know, where these characters, they go off and they do their adventures, and those subplot elements aren't needed for the story to really advance. But for a show, the audience needs to have emotional connection with the characters. And they need to have emotional connection with the players. They need to have two emotional connections. And the advantage that a city setting gives is it means that the NPCs that they're connected to, you know, the priestess that brought her up, and the old woman who raised him, and the siblings who are vying for attention from the, you know, those kind of NPC relationships can develop and bubble away, and that engages the audience and makes the characters more three-dimensional, and then they have a more emotional danger.
Right.
You know, there's a lot more emotional danger for a character if their siblings are loved by the audience than someone who's just out and about and exploring the wild.
what inspired the creative process of this story, either in the music or just creating the campaign in general? What was your inspiration?
I think first of all, it's the players that inspire it. So, we had that initial brainstorming session where we determined what we wanted the theme to be and the feel to be. That we wanted to be a low magic setting where they're humble town guards. And then what happened is we got each of them to make their characters and send me their backstory secretly. And then when I saw the NPCs and things like that, those characters then informed who I wanted to be the villains, what I wanted the tension and the drama to be about. And then, so it was kind of a combination of this setting, this kind of non-Eurocentric grand walled city based on kind of like this Constantinople, combined, which was like, most fantasy is very Eurocentric, right? And we wanted to do something North African / Middle Eastern anyway. And then combine that with these characters that were such beautiful creations by the players, that then inspired my mind to be able to create, well, what would be the counterbalance to those characters? What would get those characters to get up and do something about it?
I've listened to your music. When you've been creating music on your channel, when you do, I've lurked in the channel just listening, and you are an extraordinary musician, in my opinion. And how have you incorporated that talent in your endeavor? And does music remain your main passion, or has D&D taken over?
Time-wise, D&D, I spend more time doing D&D now than I do spending composing. Although I do have a composing gig that right after this stream that I'll be doing later in the day. All of our cast like to incorporate music into the show. Not only do I like composing the background music, but all of the cast members are good singers. They often put character voices on, so you might not be able to tell, but actually all 4 of the players are actually incredible singers.
Wow.
2 of them specialize in musical theater and are incredible singers. And they all have the ability to make things up on the spot. And so I do like to incorporate music and improvise songs and things like that. We do that for our sponsors as well. Actually, one of our sponsors, how we promote them is we improvise a song at the end of the show. So I guess that's how we do it, yeah.
You're big here on Twitch. Like I said, you're one of my favorite channels. If you scroll through the Twitch community specifically for D&D, up until recently, it hasn't been very diverse. What advice would you give to people who want to diversify their tables but have no idea where to begin or how to do it?
Well, that is a tricky question, isn't it? Because it comes down to a couple of things. I think Twitch streams generally fall into a few different categories. One are a bunch of friends who have been playing together for a while and want to share their creation with everyone around them. And they're an existing group of friends, and they are what they are.
Right.
And so with that kind of level, if one's wanting to diversify what's at the table, then I guess it's about looking at who one's friends are and inviting more diverse representation of one's friends. And if one looks at their friends and finds that actually they're all within a same kind of limited sphere, it's a good time to ask oneself, why is that? Why is my life, homogenous?
Right.
And then do something about it.
Right.
And of course, if it's a show where like ours, you're auditioning people, then I think there needs to be really deliberate thought put in of what do we want our show to represent? What do we want our show to show? And because we know that the people of the world, they want to see themselves represented in the media in all forms. And so if we're making choices about the cast members, then we need to consider, well, what's it going to look like for our audience? And then to, audition appropriately. Of course, not just hiring someone on a tokenistic way, but truly hiring people that are brilliant and the best at the job, but making sure that the net is cast wide enough that it's including that diversity that's needed.
How are you able to, balance between wanting someone who is of a different ethnicity or race and experience. I mean, they could be a great person, someone that you think is really cool, who would want at your table, but lack experience. How do you balance that with someone who's way more experienced, but may not be as ethnically diverse?
Yeah, brilliant. Excellent question. I think first and foremost, anyone can learn to play a game, right? Everyone here in this chat that's with us today, you and I, both, we had to learn how to play this game at some point. Anyone can learn to play a game, but not everyone can perform.
Right.
And so I think that choosing someone because they're good at D&D is unnecessary. Someone that knows the rules, I think that's completely irrelevant. What we really want is we want people that can bring a fresh voice, a fresh perspective to the story. We want people that enhance the story, not just visually by their ethnicity and the color of their skin, but also the diversity of their perspectives, and their skills. And so I think if one's doing an audition process, then it's important to consider all those things. What are they bringing in terms of all that stuff? Whether they're experiencing gaming, I don't think that's as important.
I agree. So Wizards of the Coast, essentially, with this new edition, which I am not a fan of, has sanitized D&D in an attempt to be more inclusive, I guess. Do you agree with the direction that they took, or that they're going with, or do you think that they should have gone a different way? Or did they make a mistake altogether?
Yeah, that's I actually, yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't really know, like, and I can understand Wizards of the Coast not wanting to ruffle feathers, right? Wanting to somehow meet this middle, and I don't envy them. But yeah, to be honest, I haven't really even looked at the new edition very much. I kind of stuck with 5th edition. I'm sorry, I'm being so vague. I'm sorry,
okay,
Sam.
It's okay.
Let's see. What do I think about this? I think that, yeah, I know that they've had their wrists slapped publicly, really publicly, and really vocally in the last year. So maybe they're just trying to play it super safe. Yeah, but that sanitized, that's an interesting perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, actually, Sam.
So here's what I think. I think that I agree. They've been publicly, for lack of a better term, put down because of their missteps in 4E and earlier auditions, and in 5E to some extent. But I think in an effort to answer or to come back at that criticism, they have taken D&D and pretty much sanitized it. They've taken out the character. They've taken out to me, the decision for people to decide, okay, I'm a woman, but I know I could play this character. And my character be what I want it to be, which is why when in 5e you have the option of making your own background. And I think they took that away in the new edition, and I think it was a huge mistake, in my opinion. It's just, in my opinion, that they went in the wrong direction by going all the way to try and make it as clean as possible, and essentially they've erased a lot of the traditions and things that are what is great about D&D. That's, I miss 5e, Yeah, exactly. A good old pendulum swing, which Book says in chat. What are your main challenges in being a very public dungeon master on a very public platform with a very public game? What are some of the challenges that you have to face doing that?
Well, there are so many challenges. The first is on the creative process. The wheel keeps on turning, and there's that output challenge that you constantly have to have a show. And if cast members suddenly get sick in the middle of it, on the day of the show and you've planned it, well, that's a big challenge. You know, there's a whole bunch of logistical challenges around running a show that's in the background that hopefully people don't see. And then there's other challenges which are more emotional. And for me, like for example, one of the things, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, I think it'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts, is cancel culture. And I have seen, in the short time that I've been involved in the kind of professional Dungeons and Dragons space, I've seen some people who've made mistakes just really get attacked. And so for all of us that create content, it's like, okay, if a guest of ours or one of our cast members, or heaven forbid myself, makes a mistake and says something, you know, that's offensive or hurts someone's feelings, or you know what could happen. Right. So that fear of cancel culture is actually a thing. Yes. For real, you know. Yeah. So you try to, but you don't like you mentioned before, you don't want to be vanilla either. You don't want to be so careful and cautious that the story has no punch. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that one.
My day job, I work for the New York City Fire Department, and I'm a department advocate. So essentially, what I like to say, and jokingly, is that I'm a lawyer without the degree, doing ADA stuff for the fire department, in the disciplinary department. So I have to be very, very careful in writing that line between things I say in my online persona and my work. And it's funny because I feel like people seem to forget in cancel culture that what people say, there has to be intent behind it. So if you didn't intentionally mean to be offensive, or you were genuinely ignorant of what you have said, then I don't think that warrants cancellation. I don't think it warrants to be, bombarded with negativity as it seems to do online, especially. It's an opportunity for the person who may have said something untoward to learn from what they've done and to go forward. Whereas the cancel culture right now is like, no matter what you say, you're going to get smacked down. And it's very, very frustrating because I feel like it should be an opportunity to learn and to better ourselves, as opposed to just, this is what you said, that's the end of you, no more. You've lost something. You've lost some type of artistry. You've lost some type of input in the world because instant cancellation. That, So, yeah, that's what mainly, like, I'm not a big fan of cancel culture just because it's all-encompassing, and it doesn't.
That's right. And where does that human quality of forgiveness, or that divine quality, whatever, how that quality, where does forgiveness come into it? And it's like, we don't want to condone bad behavior, especially really, really awful behavior.
Yes.
But how does someone come back? How do they make amends? Anyway.
As a DM, have you ever made mistakes at the table? Like, how did you learn from those mistakes? What did you do?
All the time. So, my big one constantly is finding the balance between amount of preparation, not doing enough preparation, or becoming fixated with the preparation that I've done. I don't think you can over-prepare, but becoming attached to one's preparation and then finding that the story goes in a different direction. And then the danger is trying to force the story back to where I've just spent hours preparing and they're not even gonna go there, and then trying to force it back. That's a danger. But I've made lots of mistakes all the time. In our show, I make mistakes. Look, in terms of rules, I don't know all the rules. Some people are rules lawyers, but not me. I don't think that's as important. So I make lots of mistakes. And even I see on our YouTube links, people will often say things like, shouldn't a healing spell be blah, 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 or I think the radius of that is, so there's people that know the rules far better than me.
Right.
So yeah, I make those mistakes as well all the time.
Which is funny because that actually leads into one of the questions that we were talking about before earlier, before we started this whole thing. How do you deal with those personalities, the actually people tend to uh, who tend to push those like who know all the rules, who seem to know everything aspect about D&D? How do you deal with that person, especially if they happen to be at your table in the past?
Yeah, thankfully, people in our Dicelegenz table aren't like that at all. And in fact, 3 of them are so new to D&D, they assume whatever I say must be exactly right because they've never played it before they joined our show.
Right.
But I think when people do that on social media, like when people react to our videos and say, actually, what you should have done, that's the best way to come back is home rule, home table, baby.
Yes. Yep.
This is our table. We got our own table rules.
Yep, home
And
rules
even
are
if
big.
it was a mistake, even if I didn't realize that I'd made a mistake, that's the best comeback. Baby, we're playing with those rules here on this table. So that's one. The other is to say, oh, wow, thanks so much for pointing that out. That's really helpful. I'll try to remember that next time. I think getting in an argument about it is pointless.
Right.
We're supposed to be having fun. So I like to kind of make light of it and let's move on.
Right.
I've only once had a game, I was playing a fantasy game once, where I didn't understand one aspect of the nature of the laws of physics in space. And so I had this whole adventure based on some error on my part. And halfway through, at a critical plot point, one of the players said, actually, faster than light travel doesn't work that way. And it completely derailed the entire story, ruined the entire story. There was no coming back from that one. What about you? How do you deal with it? Because you see probably a lot more people as a DM for hire.
So, as a DM for hire, it's a little bit more difficult because essentially these people are paying me. I have to give them a product, and successfully so. So what I've done is and I've borrowed this from Robert Hartley, is that I've made a set of rules that my games are not modules. I don't do modules. I haven't done module for years, not since like 4E. So all my games have homebrew rules. That helps a lot. The second part is that I make it very, very clear that you are allowed to give your input. You are allowed to make your understand, like how you understand the game, known. And welcome back, Haley. And you are allowed to express that. But if it derails the game in any way, that's not allowed. And I will happily sometimes tell you that, give you a couple warnings, but if you continue, then we have to stop the game, and that's the end of the session. So I put it on the players to keep everyone in check. So especially if a group of people are paying me, if you're paying $20 a pop, $25 a pop a person to sit at a table, people don't want to waste their money, so they have a tendency to police themselves. So it doesn't happen as often as it used to when I first began, but it does occasionally happen. So it's one of those things that you have to deal with as a DM for hire. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen in my corporate games, which is great. So, speaking of prep, you're saying sometimes you could be over prepared. How do you balance prep, your knowledge base, and winging it at your table?
Yeah, so that's the ultimate thing, isn't it? I think that's the sweet spot to try to find as a dungeon master, right? To try to find that sweet spot between preparation and improvisation. I think that's that, and when you hit that, that's when everything is golden and sings. So for me, I definitely err more on the improvised side. So my approach is to understand the big picture, really have the big picture really strong in my mind. What are the big forces? What are the big NPCs wanting to accomplish? What are they wanting to achieve?
What, in your opinion, what is the most important trait that a person needs to have in order to be successful at DMing professionally, either professionally or DMing for a show like Dice Legends?
So I think, yeah, as I was mentioning, that having that focus and the drive and a clear purpose, that's really important to set goals and objectives from that business point of view. I think is really important to know where you're going. You have to have a vision, right? If we don't have a vision, then the people suffer and languish, right? So we know that vision and purpose, focus is really important from that business point of view, and to be able to read the reality of one's situation and to figure out what are the next logical steps to advance. I think that those kind of systems thinking, I think, is really important, and it's something that I'm constantly trying to improve on. In terms of that's in the background. In terms of running the game, I think it's about totally being in the moment with the cast members, irrespective of the camera being there, and really being 100% there for them. And I think being loving and kind are essential qualities.
Yes.
That sounds airy-fairy and hippie-ish perhaps, but I actually think it's true. I think to be totally unconditionally supportive, I think, is essential. Anyway, those are some thoughts. So I don't know if they're any good, but there's some thoughts.
I think they're perfect. What is one of your biggest influences that most people have never heard of?
I used to be really influenced by comic books, but not so much now.
Okay.
I'm influenced by history a lot. For example, history, things that have happened in history are just more bizarre than myth, more bizarre than fiction, you know? And so, like, for example, the story of Genghis Khan and his history is so incredible.
Really?
That all you need to do is read a little bit of history and it just inspires a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Other things is looking at the news and thinking, okay, what would that situation be like in a fantasy setting? You know? So for example, in one of our characters, and one of our guest players came along, Caustic Phoenix, and we talked about introducing the theme of cultural appropriation, because it's a big thing in the real world. And so that theme, that real theme, we figured out how we could figure that out into a fantasy setting and what would that mean for adventure. So those, so news and history, I think those are probably my two biggest inspirations.
That's actually pretty cool because I do look at history and when I'm doing some of my games, but I look at it as somehow rearranging history to add magic to the whole thing, and it can be quite a challenge. You're coming up on a major milestone on Twitch towards your path to partnership. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, the moment you start on a Twitch trajectory, you want to get affiliate as soon as you can, and then of course you want to get partnership as soon as you can, because it unlocks the ability to stream on YouTube at the same time as Twitch. That's the biggest benefit for us.
Okay.
Other than that, it doesn't change a lot of things for us. That's the main thing. Yeah, so our main goal really is, partnership is great, but that's not our main goal. Our main goal is getting more followers. That's what we're really working towards. And so we're experimenting with different ways of trying to do that, including one of the things that we're going to be doing this week, in fact, is running 24/7 reruns for a few days. Yeah, so having talked to other people that are partners, I'm not sure how much of their life has changed with reaching that milestone. We'll be excited when we get there, of course.
I listen to a lot of interviews, mostly to hone my craft as an interviewer, but also because I like listening to other people's perspective. And I've heard that you've played every edition of D&D. Which one is your favorite?
Definitely 5th edition is my favorite. But I've loved all of them, right? So, because all of them were groundbreaking when they first came out. 4th edition is kind of hammered by people, is kind of like looked down as the worst edition, but even 4th edition did some cool, awesome things. You know, when I started with at basic, it was awesome. But you know, if you were an elf, that was your class and your race. If you were a dwarf, that was your class and your race. You know, and so then when Advanced Dungeons & Dragons came out, it was like, whoa, this is so amazing. And then when 3rd edition came out, like with all the skills and things, it's whoa, so amazing. And then 4th edition came out with I love the mooks mechanic that they had. 1 hit point mooks, too good. In fact, that should be reintroduced into 5th edition.
I agree, absolutely agree.
And then 5th edition came out with all of the background things, and oh, so good. And the inspiration, advantage, disadvantage mechanic, oh, so good. So I've loved all of them, really.
Okay.
That doesn't help answer your question, I'm sorry.
It does to a point. So being as that you have a love of D&D in general, what is a tabletop RPG game that you love that isn't D&D?
All right, so there's a whole bunch. First of all, and something that other people that have come to my channel have heard me say, the West End Games Star Wars D6 system is the fastest adventure-heavy system you can have. If you want a game that is just fast, where your characters can do this and this and this, and feel like they're progressing, that game system is awesome. Unfortunately, it didn't survive and it died. That was cool, but you can probably still get the PDFs. I still love playing that. Next, there's a superhero game way back in the 80s that I have some tattered copies of called Champions, and I've loved playing that game. It's unbalanced. There's a lot of things about it that are really easy to manipulate, but as a superhero game, I really enjoy Champions. You don't have classes at all, just a list of skills and superpowers that you buy with points, and it makes it so easy to custom make things. So easy. So those are 2 examples that I really love. And the only one I'll throw in there is another older game. These are all older games. Is Paranoia, which we did in our stream party a couple weeks ago. Paranoia is just too much fun.
Okay.
So what about you? What are your favorites?
So, I am fully into D&D, but I used to love playing Vampire the Masquerade a lot. Like, I would play it a lot. Other than that, D&D has always been my favorite. I think D&D will always be my favorite, but Cyberpunk and Vampire the Masquerade are always near and dear to my heart. What does your family, whether your extended family or your immediate family, think about all of this?
Yeah, well, it's a spectrum, right? Some love it. One of my daughters is probably one of our biggest fans. And one of my nephews thinks that I'm the coolest uncle in the world. So for that reason alone, it's worth keeping on going. So there's those 2 on one end of the spectrum. My brother plays D&D and I play D&D with him, so he's very supportive. And then there's others in my family who just don't get it at all. Yeah. And I think are probably thinking, what the heck is he doing with his life? But overall, very supportive. And, you know, extended family members, yeah, I think overall are supportive.
Yeah, my mother has no idea what I do. She's kind of just like, you're going to do what? Okay, have fun. And she has no idea, but she's very supportive. My sister knows what I do. They're all very supportive. There's no real negativity. All my friends' family, no real negativity. Just curiosity or indifference. Those are the only 2 things I get. Rules as written or rules as intended?
I'm definitely closer to the rules as intended. Okay. Definitely. I think that the rule of cool, the drama of the moment, always trumps rules.
Right.
The rules are important for creating a sense of balance, so that we don't have I think the importance of rules is 2-fold. 1, to give unpredictability, and 2, to make sure that each of the players feels that they have an equal stake in the game, that they're not going to be ripped off, or that they can't be walked over or manipulated by a a system that is too loose. So I think the rules are really important. But on our channel, we try to never pull out the player's handbook and look up the rules because it slows down the progress. Sometimes we have to because it's an important moment and we do that. But in general, one of the things I took from that Star Wars role-playing game that I told you about that I love so much is they point out that if you don't know the rule, make it up and then say sorry later. And say, I'll look it up properly later. Just make up the rule and move on. That for a sense of adventure, you want things to constantly be moving. You don't want to be bogged down by looking through rules. And so we definitely focus more on rule of cool and as intended. We try to get the rules right, but we don't always do so. Yourself, what about you?
I'm rules as intended, mostly because I feel like I have so much information in my head, whether it's D&D or it's my job or it's some random information that I happen to have. I don't want to bog it down with anything else. So it's rules as intended for me. It makes the game flow better. It makes the feel of the story more cohesive. And honestly, if you're so stuck on the rules, you're not having fun. That's it's been in my opinion for a long, long time. If you're so bogged down in what the rules are, you can possibly be having fun at the table. And I want you to have fun when you're playing D&D. So, rules is intended for me. If you can DM for anyone, dead, alive, real or fiction, who would it be?
Do you mind before I just want to go back to your previous question just for a little bit. I think that it's interesting that there are some people that really, 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 really love the rules. And it's, good for them. And there are a lot of people that have like an encyclopedic knowledge of the rules and they love it. Like our friend Robert Hartley, he knows the rules well.
Yes.
And there are some personality types that really, really like knowing those specific things, and all power to them. And if there's someone at the table that's like that, great, as long as it doesn't interrupt the flow of the adventure. Yeah, but it's fascinating that there are a lot of people, and I wonder if there's anyone here in chat that consider themselves a rules lawyer. It'd be interesting to know, but yeah, anyway, so that was the first one. And then your next question was, if there's anyone that I'd love to do a game with, who would it be? Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people. I mean, from a channel point of view, of course, we'd love to be able to have any of the Critical Role crew on our channel, of course, and we'd love to have any of the Dimension 20 crew on our channel because they're so clever and talented, and of course. Other than that, I've never actually, well, I'll have to ponder that a little bit deeper. Sorry, Sam, that's not a very good answer at all.
No, it's okay. That's actually, I mean, honestly, it's one of those questions it's usually toward the end of the questions because I know most people are kind of like, I don't know who I could possibly think of. And it's such a broad question. It's just one of those fun things. I'm kind of curious, Hello, welcome to the channel, Robbie Hoodie. Nice to meet you. It's one of those questions that I throw out there because I'm just curious to see who would you like? Would it be a family member? Would it be a celebrity? Someone who doesn't know D&D at all? Would it be Bugs Bunny? I've actually had someone say, after asking that question, said that they wanted to have Thanos at their table, which was quite interesting conversation to have.
Morgan Freeman.
Ooh.
I think he'd be fascinating to have at the table. This with his incredible voice. That would be.
Like, that'd be actually a good person to have at the table, mostly because his not only his acting experience but his life experience, to see what he would bring as a character would be very, very interesting. I didn't even think of that. That's a good one. So we're gonna open up the questions to chat right now. Since we started a little bit late, we're gonna go over. Obviously, that's perfectly fine. Chat, if you have any questions, and my mods may have had questions that were in the queue that I didn't get to look at. If you have any questions in chat, feel free to post it in and ask what would you like to ask, and within reason. So, but what do you have planned for the future of Dicelegenz and for your DMing?
What we're focusing on at this moment, because as a, there's the business side and there's the show side. So I'll answer that in terms of both of those. From the business side, we're really wanting to continue doing collaborations like this. We love the opportunity that you've given us, Sam, to come on your channel. And because these collaborations, that's how we work, right? Competition isn't how society is built, collaboration is how society is built. And so that's one of our main goals, is to really enhance our collaboration and our relationships. So thank you, Sam, for helping us with that. And the second is, we need to crack TikTok. We really do, and we haven't been able to. So from the business side of things, those are our two biggest goals.
Yeah.
From the game point of view, we've just started a second campaign. It's in a totally different setting, totally different characters. And that exposes us to very different story opportunities. And so the goal is to weave the most exciting, engaging fantasy story that we can possibly create. So that is our goal, to create the best fantasy story the world has ever had. Whether we'll be able to do that, who knows?
Yeah.
But that's the goal.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely the goal. TikTok is one of my banes of my existence. I have a TikTok channel that essentially and initially was supposed to be for adjunct for this channel, for this Twitch platform. It has been the most difficult thing for me to balance. So right now my TikTok channel is just me with random videos talking about whatever pops into my head. There's even one that I think with me cleaning fish and talking about reading a book backwards. So one of my little quirks. Myth says that someone in chat, Jay asked earlier, how you get amazing guests to your channel. Like I for one have seen Robert Hartley on your channel a couple times. How do you get those guests to your channel?
I watch a whole bunch of people here on Twitch. I see who are the streamers that I think are aligned with the values of our channel, right? So we have an inclusive channel. We have a channel that is optimistic and about inspiring imagination. Like, who do we see of these streamers that might connect with us? And then I'll find their contact details, and it might be on Twitter or it might be on an email address, and I'll reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to do a collaborative chat? And then, or be a guest. Usually we do a chat first, and then depending upon how that goes, then see whether or not an opportunity exists to have them as a guest player in the show. And thankfully, once you get a couple of people that come on and are guest players, other people can see that, oh yeah, they were treated well on that show. Okay, that looks like it could be fun. And so I think, then once you have a few guests, then it's easier to approach other guests and with confidence.
Robbie Hoodie 27 asks, he always thought, I'm great finding out how famous you are apparently. I thought you were just an amazing DM. Tell us about I heard that you had some people coming up to you asking for your autograph and pictures. Is that true?
We had a really strange situation at the first convention that we did. We had a stall at a NerdCon here in New Zealand, and it was really odd to have people come up and ask for our autographs. It was very unusual. Now, having said that, as I mentioned at the beginning, 3 of our cast members work in the TV. 2 of them are television presenters on national television program here in New Zealand.
Okay.
One in particular, Ronnie, who I've mentioned before, is world famous here in New Zealand. Everyone below the age of 40 would probably know who Ronnie is. Okay. And so whenever you're with Ronnie, people always come up to him, and we just bask in his glory.
Oh, wow. So Robbie asks also again, what's your favorite thing you've ever worked on that's not Dungeons & Dragons related?
Animation, writing music for animation, okay. 1000%. Hang on, there's a couple of jobs I've really loved. I love working on animation. Um, there's a preschool animation called Darwin and Newts that you can look up that I wrote the music for. I really enjoyed working on that. That was put out a few years ago. Something from a number of years ago, I worked on a television show, and I got to do a whole bunch of voice acting.
Oh, wow.
And they just gave me complete reign to say what I wanted. And I was the announcer of the show. So it would be like, what now, 8 a.m. on TV2? Or what now, 8 a.m. on TV2? And you know, they would allow me to do all these just stupid voices, whatever I wanted. And to be given that much freedom is like given enough rope to kind of hang yourself with kind of thing. But it was, you know, sorry, I shouldn't even use analogies like that. But that was really fun, being given that creative freedom.
Right.
Those are a couple examples.
Maddie asks, who's your biggest musical inspiration in soundtrack world and non-film entertainment music world?
I have too many. Maddie is a loyal member of our Dicelegenz community. I have so much love for Maddie. And one of the things that Maddie and I share in common is a love of music and obscure music. So she and I are often posting obscure music. In the film world, you can't beat John Williams for a creator of theme music that you can sing. Like, there are others really amazing composers that can evoke a mood and create things. But in terms of melodies, John Williams, come on, you know, Harry Potter, Jaws, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Superman, you know, like, if you want a theme to be remembered, you hire John Williams. In the non-film world, there's too many. Bob Marley is probably my biggest influence, followed by Beethoven, followed by Bob Dylan. So those are my non-music. And then we start getting into things that are a lot more remote. There's a lot of reggae stuff that I love that you probably wouldn't have heard of.
Okay. Now that I don't think we have any more questions. Does anyone have any more questions? If they do, please put it in the chat. But what we know that the plans for Dicelegenz is, what's the plans for Vahid himself?
Yeah, right. And I hope you're going to answer this question about yourself too. I'd like to know for you too. Plans for myself, at the moment, because our show is new, any new business just requires 10,000% commitment, right? So a lot of my time and energy goes into this show. And then of course I've got a family. And so there's a lot of energy that goes into a family. And I'm part of a community. And so a lot of energy goes. So for me, it's that juggling act of balancing all the aspects of life to try to be in one harmonious, smooth juggling movement. And at the moment, the show is like a shot put. Poof! Yes. So, you know, it requires so much attention as we're getting it going. So for me, I think it'd be, you know, progressing this show and continuing to enjoy it. What about you?
Well, I guess that's as good a time as any to reveal how the plans have changed for this channel. Essentially, originally this channel was to support the creators that I liked. So anything that I made on Twitch, and part of what I made through my business through DMing, would be given back to creators that I enjoy. Dicelegenz, Robert Hartley, Lord Gazumba, Careful Cantrip. I would give it back in the form of sub gifts or cheers or something like that. That has changed recently to my main goal now, with people moving away from scheduled television and moving away from, you know, regular channel TV and coming toward different areas to watch different things, whether it's on Hulu or Netflix to watch certain TV shows, or on Twitch where they watch whatever strikes their fancy. I want to make my channel into one of those things that is interview based, so that one day, maybe well into the future, hopefully soon, that Twitch would be people on Twitch would be Emmy nominated, be able to be Emmy nominated based off their show. So something like Dicelegenz could be Emmy nominated. I think that would be great. And I want to continue this channel. Unfortunately, because things have changed significantly in the world due to COVID relaxation endeavors, the business side has eased up a lot. So the supporting stuff that I normally support, the people who I normally support, I've had to come back off of and use the things that I've had, the profits to maintain what I'm doing here. So that's where we're at now with this channel. But we're gonna see. We're gonna continue to build this as a interview channel where I occasionally do D&D stuff, whether it's making player characters for my business, or we'll figure something out along the way. Um, we'll continue and try and build this channel. That's where we're at for now. You know, I also have 6 years left of fire department stuff, but that's another story. Book asks, for a new DM, where would you suggest starting off? Like a good edition to start with?
I think you can start anywhere. Book, you can any game, any edition. I think 5th edition is the best to start with because it's the most accessible to people. I think it's the most accessible edition that we've had yet. The rules are the most consistent. You can kind of get started making a character and then get into it. That's what I would start. And I would also start book with modules. As Sam said, you know, but neither Sam or I run modules anymore. We do homebrew, but modules are the best way to get started there. And a lot of the Wizards of the Coast modules are really, really great to be able to get into things. So that's what I would start with.
He says thank you. Robbie asks, Vahid, will you do an Operation Opera? I'm not sure what that is. Always love hearing your silly songs. What's an Operation Opera?
Well, Robbie is being very cheeky. Operation Opera is a thing that people can redeem with channel points on our channel, which force me to improvise a song on whatever theme they want me to do. And they're always mediocre songs. I don't have my guitar here, Robbie, so I'm not gonna do it.
That's awesome.
Good try, though.
He makes the best songwriter, he says. That is awesome. Now that I know that exists, I think I might pop into your channel and redeem that. That is so cool. Thank you so much for coming on here. It was an absolute pleasure. You're so much fun to have.